Sound echoed through the house like something straight out of a nightmare. Bam, bam, bam. Jingle bells clanged wildly against the walls, followed by a deep, rumbling voice that seemed to crawl under my skin. Ho ho ho. Merry Christmas, it called. It was December 15th. Christmas was still 10 days away, and the idea of Santa coming early was ridiculous. And yet, there I was waking up to a scene that seemed impossible. My name is Ella, and I share a house with my little brother, Jamie, and my younger sister, Zoe. We live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, and honestly, the holiday season was always a peaceful time for us. The tree wasn't up yet, the house still smelled like the stale air of post-fall, and we hadn't even started our Christmas shopping. It was just another Saturday morning until now. The jingling bells were louder this time. Ho ho ho. Merry Christmas, the voice boomed again. I shot out of bed, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. My siblings were already up, standing frozen in the doorway of the hallway, their faces pale and filled with confusion. Dad. Mom. Jamie's voice trembled. What is happening? I rushed to the window. Nothing was out of the ordinary in the front yard, but I could hear footsteps, heavy ones creaking across the floorboards downstairs. Someone was in the house. A chill ran down my spine as I turned to face my siblings. Stay here, I whispered, but my words barely broke the thick silence. I grabbed a flashlight and crept down the stairs, my pulse hammering in my ears. The living room was eerily quiet. And then, I saw him. Santa Claus. Or at least, what looked like Santa. His red suit was tattered, the white fur around his collar stained with something dark. His eyes, though they weren't twinkling like they should have been. They were cold eyes, almost too dark, like a bottomless pit. His laughter was too deep, too hollow, as though it came from somewhere far beyond this world. I barely breathe. Ho ho ho. Merry almost Christmas, he said, turning toward me. His voice was low, chilling. It was as if the very words were spoken from a place of malice. Get out of my house, I demanded, though my voice quivered. But Santa just smiled, the corners of his lips curling unnaturally. Oh, Ella, it's too late for that. My parents arrived downstairs moments later, both of them looking disheveled and panicked. Mom was clutching a kitchen towel, and Dad looked like he'd just crawled out of a nightmare himself. His eyes were wide with shock, and for a split second, I saw something unfamiliar, in his gaze a flicker of fear. Who is this? Mom whispered, her voice cracking as she looked at the figure in the corner of the room. Santa was standing still now, his wide, eerie smile never wavering. I'm Santa Claus, he said, though there was no warmth in his voice. It was as if the words were forced, twisted. I've come to deliver your gifts early. Jamie and Zoe, frozen in place behind us, stared at him with wide, confused eyes. Mom. Dad. What's going on? Jamie asked. I tell my parents were trying to make sense of it too. But something was off. Their reactions were all wrong. They didn't seem excited or worried. They seemed distant. This isn't Santa, I said quietly, my heart racing. Something's wrong. Mom looked at me, her face pale. What are you talking about, Ella? This is Santa. We've been waiting for him, haven't we? Her words were flat, lifeless, like she was being controlled by something. Dad nodded stiffly. Yeah. Ella, Go help your siblings, all right. It's time to open the presents. I felt a chill settle deep in my bones. No, you're not getting it. This isn't Santa. And then, something happened. The air around us grew colder. A glow filled the room, and the lights flickered as the air turned thick with dread. Santa stepped forward, his feet dragging across the wooden floor with a slow, deliberate pace. His hands were twisted, his fingers longer than any human's, sharp like claws. He reached into his sack, his movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. Ho ho ho, he whispered again, but this time it sounded like a warning. The sack was empty, save for a handful of shredded paper and a few brittle branches of dead pine. His eyes locked onto mine. I bring gifts. For all of you. I should have run, but I couldn't. There was something holding me there, something that kept my feet glued to the floor. Santa, or whatever it was, reached into his bag once more, pulled out a large, withered box and handed it to Zoe. She took it with trembling hands, unaware of the danger. My little sister, normally the most cheerful of all of us, just stared at the gift like it was the greatest thing she'd ever received. Open it, Santa coaxed. His voice was almost hypnotic. Zoe, eager as ever, tore at the wrapping. She gasped when she saw the contents. Her face turned from excitement to confusion, and then to pure terror. Inside the box were bones. Human bones, covered in dirt, with tiny rotting pieces of flesh still attached to them. Zoe screamed and dropped the box, the sound echoing off the walls. That's not a present. Jamie yelled, backing away, his eyes wide with fear. Santa just watched, his twisted smile widening. Oh, but it is. These are gifts, all of you. I turned to my parents, hoping they'd snap out of whatever trance they were in. Their faces were slack, blank, as if they had been replaced with something else entirely. They didn't even flinch when Santa moved closer to them. Mom. Dead. I shouted, but they did react. Santa, stop. I demanded. But he just chuckled. I can't stop, he said, his voice dropping into something guttural, deep, and wrong. I'm here to deliver my gifts. Suddenly, the room grew darker. Shadows in the corners of the room seemed to grow longer, more distorted, like they were alive. The temperature dropped so suddenly that I could see my breath. Santa reached into his sack again, and this time he pulled out something that made my heart stop, a silver chain, with a delicate pendant hanging from it. It was my grandmother's necklace. She had passed away last year. How? I gasped, my voice shaking. Santa's face twisted in grotesque delight. You didn't think I'd forget you, Ella, did you? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't Santa. It never was. This was something far worse. The real Santa was a jolly man who brought joy and cheer. This thing was something darker, something that thrived on fear, something that fed off the dread of children. And it had been lurking in our house for years, hidden beneath the facade of Christmas cheer. The twisting figure before us was not just some misplaced holiday visitor. It was a creature, an entity that took the form of Santa to get close, to strike fear, to deliver horrors masquerading as gifts. And it had been waiting. Why? I whispered, barely able to breathe. Santa grinned, its teeth now sharp and yellow. You think this is just about presents? No, child. I have been waiting. Waiting for the right time to return. Now, you all belong to me. Shadows in the room thickened, wrapping around us like chains. We couldn't move. The house itself seemed to bend, the walls closing in, and I could hear whispers in the dark corners of the room, calling my name. I turned to run, but my body betrayed me. My feet wouldn't move. "Not so fast," the creature said, its voice dripping with malice. "You're not leaving until I'm done." Could feel the pressure in my chest, the freezing grip of fear that spread through my veins like ice. My heart raced, but my legs wouldn't move. No matter how hard I tried to push forward, my body refused to obey. Shadows in the corners of the room closed in, wrapping themselves around my feet like thick, oily chains, holding me in place. Santa moved closer, its presence suffocating the air. Each step was slow, deliberate, like it was savoring my fear. I could feel its eyes burning into me, drilling into my very soul. It wasn't just an entity, it was something ancient, malevolent, and it was feeding off my terror. "Don't be afraid, Ella," it whispered, its voice now a gravelly rasp, as though it had crawled from the deepest pits of hell. It's already too late. I tried to scream, but my throat tightened as if invisible hands were choking me. My eyes darted around in desperation, looking for an escape. The front door was right there. I could make it, but I couldn't move. Shadows were pulling me back, dragging me toward the monstrous thing that had once worn the jolly red suit. The room grew colder still, and I could hear the faint sound of jingling bells again, but this time they weren't joyful. They sounded hollow, like they belonged that had long since rotted away. "Please," I gasped, my breath shallow, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Why are you doing this? What do you want from us?" Creature's eyes, those black, bottomless pits, shone with twisted delight. "What I want? Oh, Ella, I don't want anything from you. This is my gift. This is your Christmas now." And then, in a movement so fast it almost made my eyes blur, it lunged toward me, its claws outstretched, its mouth wide open, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Could hear the sickening sound of its breath, and before I knew it, its cold, bony fingers were wrapping around my wrist. I had no choice. I had to fight. I had to do something. With the last ounce of strength I could muster, I twisted my body and managed to break free from its grip. My legs, now fully aware of the danger, kicked into motion, and I ran. I ran harder than I had ever run in my life. The front door just a few feet away was now within reach, but it felt like I was moving through molasses, like the very air was thick with dread, pulling me back. Behind me, the creature's voice echoed in a low, guttural laugh. "You can't escape me. No one ever does." I reached the door, my fingers fumbling with the handle. My heart pounded in my chest, and just as I was about to pull it open, a cold hand gripped my shoulder from behind. I screamed, but there was no sound. The air itself was suffocating. With a final surge of adrenaline, I spun around and shoved the door open. Freezing night air hit me like a slap to the face, and for a brief moment, I felt free. Creature's laughter still echoed behind me, a warning that would haunt me forever. I didn't dare look back. My feet pounded the pavement as I ran down the street, the howling wind drowning out everything but my own heartbeat. And then, just as I was about to round the corner, I heard it one last scream, a tortured cry that could have only come from a soul trapped within that thing's twisted grasp. I woke up the next morning, gasping for breath, drenched in cold sweat. The house was silent. Too silent. No jingling bells, no horrifying laugh. It was as if the events of the previous night had been nothing more than a twisted dream. But I knew better. Terror still clung to me like a shadow. My house felt wrong, as if it had been altered by something beyond human understanding. The walls were too close, the silence too oppressive. I walked through the rooms cautiously, but nothing seemed out of place except for one thing. The Christmas tree was fully decorated now. There were presents beneath it beautifully wrapped, the kind I'd always dreamed of. But something in my gut told me not to open them. Don't touch them. I glanced around the room, and that's when I saw it. A single card on the table, written in red ink. "Thank you for the wonderful gift, Ella." And then, below the message, was a date, December 15th. The date was wrong. It wasn't Christmas. It wasn't supposed to be Christmas yet. I froze. My heart sank. The date wasn't the only thing wrong. The handwriting, it was familiar, but not in a way that should have been comforting. It was the same handwriting as my mother's, only it was too neat, too perfect. I turned to face my family, and that's when I saw it. The vacant, empty looks on their faces. My mother, father, and siblings all standing in the living room, their eyes wide open, staring at me with no recognition, no emotion. "Mom," I whispered. But she didn't respond. She just stood there, her body stiff, her lips curled into a cold, hollow smile. It wasn't her smile. It wasn't them. Then, I heard it. The faint jingling of bells, growing louder by the second. Something or someone was still out there. And I knew, deep down, that I was never truly free. Well, that's it for today's story. Or maybe it's just the beginning. I wish I could say that everything turned out fine, but the truth is, there's no easy way out of this. Not for me, not for my family, and probably not for anyone who watches this. I've told you my story, and now it's your turn. You've ever had a strange feeling about Christmas, about Santa, or about anything that seems too perfect to be true, don't ignore it. Don't brush it off as some weird holiday coincidence. Because sometimes the monsters come early. And sometimes they don't leave. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, and remember, if you hear jingling bells outside your window this December, maybe, just maybe, it's not the Christmas spirit. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. But if you really enjoyed it, be careful. You might want to check under your tree tonight. I'll see you next time, or will I? Good night.